Hello, and welcome to the ultimate camera comparison between the iPhone 8 Plus and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. So I haven't actually done a camera comparison in, quite a while, and I wanted to make up for it by doing what's probably the world's most in-depth camera comparison between these two that anyone has ever done. So this video contains not 5, not 10, but actually 20 different camera test scenarios. So everything from Panorama Shots, 4K video recording at different resolutions, bitrate comparison, storage space comparison, night shots with and without flash, pretty much anything that you can think of when it comes to camera tests, everything is covered in this video. Now, all the shots that you're about to see have been taken on full auto mode. So I haven't adjusted the focus, I haven't adjusted the exposure manually, so none of these shots have any adjustments, not even color correction applied. And I've exported all the shots from both of these devices straight from the devices, so not a cloud, so they have the original quality, no compression, nothing applied. And also be sure to watch this video at 4K at 60 frames per second if you can, or at least 60 frames per second, even if it's 1080p or 720p, because the iPhone 8 can actually do 4K video at 60 frames per second, and only watching this video in 60, that's the only way you can actually tell the difference in smoothness. So grab some snacks and enjoy this ultimate camera review between the iPhone 8 Plus and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. Okay, so section number 1, I just want to go over through all the camera specs. So on the back-facing camera, we have 12 megapixel sensors on both. Now we have an f1.7 aperture on the Samsung Galaxy S8 versus f1.8 aperture on the iPhone 8 Plus. So the Samsung Galaxy S8 should be better in low light, but Apple has also improved the sensor on the iPhone 8 and the 8 Plus and the iPhone 10. So the iPhone 8 is now 83% better in low light, or at least it lets 83% more light into the sensor than the iPhone 7 did. Now when it comes to video, the iPhone 8 can do 4K video at 60 frames per second and also 1080p at 240, and the Samsung Galaxy S8 can do 4K 30 and 720p 40. So video-wise, the iPhone 8 should be better. And when it comes to the front-facing camera, we have an 8 megapixel sensor on the S8 versus 7 megapixel sensors on the iPhone 8, f1.7 aperture on the Samsung Galaxy S8 versus f2.2. So when it comes to the front-facing camera, the S8 should be better, and also in the low light. And also when it comes to video on the front-facing camera, the Samsung Galaxy S8 can do Quad HD video in up to 30 frames per second, whereas the iPhone 8 can only do 1080p 30 on the front-facing camera. So judging by these specs alone, the S8 should actually have a much better front-facing camera, both in low light and just the resolution itself. But the iPhone 8 should be better when it comes to video. So let's put all of these specs to the test and see. Okay, so the first image is this one with this boat. I think it's a really good picture because you get a lot of bright areas, you get a lot of dark areas, and you also get the color from the boat. So if you take a look at a Samsung Galaxy S8 image, this one is quite a lot darker than the iPhone 8 Plus one. Now, in terms of the color temperature, the iPhone 8 is indeed warmer, whereas the Samsung Galaxy S8 has a much more cooler image. But the iPhone 8 is sharper when it comes to this picture. So if you take a look at the clouds, if you zoom into the clouds, you can see how much sharper the iPhone 8 is when compared to the Samsung Galaxy S8. And same applies to the wood next to the boat. The iPhone 8 is again much sharper and also brighter. So we have an f1.7 aperture on the S8 versus f1.8 on the iPhone 8, and it's quite interesting seeing that the iPhone 8 is brighter than the S8. Same applies to the grid on the top, so it's sharper on the iPhone 8, and also the chair in the boat. So if you take a look at the chair, the colors are better on the iPhone 8, and the chair itself is sharper on the iPhone 8 than on the Samsung Galaxy S8. Also, speaking of the colors, the color of the boat in real life was actually yellow, and on the iPhone 8 we have this color kinda, whereas on the Samsung Galaxy S8 it's more of like an orange. So the boat in real life, it was definitely yellow. Now the second image is actually quite difficult to master. So this is a pretty tricky shot because we have a much darker area on the bottom and the trees, and under the trees the shadow, and then we have the sky, which is really bright. And obviously we need a pretty good balance of both dark and bright areas. So in this photo we actually get to see how well the HDR mode works on both smartphones. And interesting enough, this time the S8 is actually warmer, and I do personally like the added vibrancy on the S8. But then again, the iPhone 8 is so much sharper. So if you take a look at the leaves, they're much clearer on the iPhone 8 versus the Samsung Galaxy S8. And then in terms of dynamic range, the clouds are also much more visible on the iPhone 8. But interesting enough, the S8 has a much better color reproduction, when it comes to the clouds, and especially if you take a look at the greens, they're much more greener, so to say, than the washed out colors on the iPhone 8. Now, speaking of difficult photos, this third one is even more difficult to master. So in this one, you have everything that you need. You have bright areas, you have dark areas, you have lots of colors, so it's very, very tricky for these smartphones to master. And I really like the way the S8 one looks. But when it comes to HDR, the iPhone 8 does retain more detail. Keep in mind that the iPhone 8 now does HDR automatically, so you don't have to select it. So if you take a look at the trees on the right, they're much more in focus than on the Samsung Galaxy S8, and the sky is also more bluish on the iPhone 8 versus this grayish tone on the S8. And also if you take a look at the clouds, they're much more blown out on the Samsung Galaxy S8. So yeah, interesting enough, on the left, the S8 is not in focus on the leaves, but the iPhone 8, on the other hand, is not in focus on the right, and the S8 is in focus on the right. So it seems that both phones have adjusted the focus on a different region. And in terms of the noise, if you take a look at the shadows, there's a lot more noise on the Samsung Galaxy S8 when compared to the iPhone 8. Now the next test is a couple of macro shots. Now keep in mind that this was not taken with the zoom lens, there's a different test for that. So these are basically just really, really close-up shots. So in this first one, I actually prefer the way the Samsung Galaxy S8 one looks in terms of overall colors. But again, if you take a look at the sharpness, the iPhone 8 is so much sharper, especially if you take a look at the corners of the image. So this is a bench. If you take a look at everything that's not in the center, it's so much sharper on the iPhone 8 versus the Samsung Galaxy S8. Now, this is because the S8 comes with an f1.7 aperture versus f1.8 on the iPhone 8. So you get that slight bokeh, the slight blurriness on the S8. But if you take a look at only the center itself, the S8 is indeed much sharper in the center. Now, this is mostly because of that extra sharpening that's going on in post-processing. Next up, we have this second image. I really, really love this one. You can pretty much use this as a wallpaper. So in this one, I love how the S8 looks. So the S8 got all the colors right. The iPhone 1 looks better in terms of how artistic the picture is, but I think it processed HDR way, way too heavily on this one. So in this case, the S8 looks much more realistic than the iPhone 8, but the iPhone 8 one looks kind of cool. Now moving on to the zoom shots, obviously the Samsung Galaxy S8 doesn't have a second camera module, only the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has that. But I just wanted to see how a zoomed in shot with the optical zoom on the iPhone 8 Plus compares to the digital zoom on the Samsung Galaxy S8. And it's actually really, really good. So obviously the iPhone 8 one is sharper because of that telephoto lens, but the Samsung Galaxy S8 is actually surprisingly good, considering that this is just digital zoom. Obviously, this was just something interesting that I wanted to test out. So S8 Plus, when it comes to digital zoom, quite impressive, I would say, especially because of that added sharpening done in post. Now, moving on to a couple of shots taken in low light with a back-facing camera. So in this first image, the Samsung Galaxy S8 looks so much better than the iPhone 8. So we get a much sharper image. And then also if you take a look at the blue tones in the sky, the S8 is much more true to life. And the S8 also retained much more detail in the pavement. If you take a look at the pavement, and then the same thing applies for the trees on the left. So the trees on the left are much sharper on the S8, whereas on the iPhone 8, for some reason, they're quite blurry. Now, when it comes to the actual noise, take a look at the building on the right. So on the building on the right, this is actually an exception. The S8 actually lost quite a lot of detail, whereas you can still see a lot of detail on the iPhone 8, especially when it comes to the lines. But overall, the S8 is definitely better when it comes to this first low light photo. Moving on to the second low light photo, we have this tree. And in this one, the S8 overall, if you take a look at the image, the S8 looks better. But the iPhone 8 has a much, much better focus. So everything on the left-hand side of the image, on the right-hand side, on the S8 is actually out of focus, which is a bit strange. On the iPhone 8 Plus, everything is perfectly in focus. So when it comes to focus and this image, focus is so much better on the iPhone 8 Plus. Moving on to the final low light image, we have this one. So this one is actually a pretty good way to demonstrate low light performance, because this image overall is a pretty dark one. We only have the lights coming from the buildings in the front, which are also reflected in the water. And with this one, the S8 is so much sharper than the iPhone 8 one. And also if you take a look at the building on the left, on the top, in the blue area, you can see much more details have been retained on the S8. And same applies to the colors. They're much more vibrant on the S8, whereas on the iPhone 8, they do feel a bit more washed out. Also, if you take a look at the sky, on the iPhone 8, there's a lot of noise. So low light overall, the Samsung Galaxy S8 definitely wins this one. But what about the low light with using the flash? So in this first image, you can definitely see that the Samsung Galaxy S8 used a flash on this one. So this is definitely a photo taken with a flash. Now on the iPhone 8, it actually looks quite interesting. So it's much darker, definitely, but you can't really tell that this was taken with a flash. So it feels much more natural and also much sharper. So if you take a look at the zoomed in image, there's a massive difference in terms of clarity. It's so soft on the S8. And also on the iPhone 8, if you take a look at the sky, there's almost no noise in the sky, and same applies to the building. It's so much sharper on the iPhone 8 versus the Samsung Galaxy S8. So flash-wise, it seems that the iPhone 8 is better. Now in the second image, again, you can see how the S8 definitely feels like, you know, a photo taken with a flash, whereas on the iPhone 8 it looks much more like natural light. Also, if you take a look at the colors, they're much more realistic and so much more true to life on the iPhone 8 versus the ones on the S8. And same applies to picture number 3 taken with a flash. So on the Samsung Galaxy S8 we do get more light, so the flash seems to be brighter, but overall we do have a much sharper image and a much more natural look with the iPhone 8 shot. So flash-wise, the iPhone 8 is better than the Samsung Galaxy S8, but when it comes to low light performance, it seems that a Samsung Galaxy S8 is better. Now let's just take a look at some videos taken with a back-facing camera. So in this one, I just want to test out the dynamic range. So this is a pan, 60 frames per second on the iPhone 8 and 30 frames per second on a Samsung Galaxy S8. Now a few things I want to point out. So the Samsung Galaxy S8 video is definitely sharper, but that's because of the post-processing sharpening, which I don't really like. This is a personal choice. I don't really like sharpening, but the S8 is definitely sharper. Now the S8 is also darker if you compare these two. So you do lose quite a lot of detail in the trees if you take a look at the trees. And the S8 is also more vibrant. So the iPhone 8 colors are a bit more washed out, but they are more true to life than the S8 ones. Now if you take a closer look at the sky, there's much more detail on the S8, but the tones are actually better on the iPhone 8. So sky-wise, the S8 looks closer to how it actually looked in real life. And then I also have a quick video in which I want to show you the difference between 60 frames per second and 30 frames per second, and also the camera rolling shutter. So hopefully you can tell the difference. Hopefully you're watching this video in 60 frames per second. Seems like there's this jelly-like effect on the S8 caused by the stabilization. So seems that this is inertia-based stabilization. The iPhone 8 also has a jelly effect, but it's significantly worse on the S8 than the iPhone 8. And now if you take a look at just the water, the S8 is sharper than the iPhone 8's water when there's a lot of movement, but that's again because of the sharpening. Now taking a look at some video stabilization in 4K, as you can see, the S8 is more stable than the iPhone 8, which is quite surprising. I wasn't expecting this. Now, this is most likely because the iPhone 8, this is a 4K 60 video, and the iPhone 8 doesn't support cinematic stabilization, so software stabilization on 4K 60 videos. Also, on the iPhone 8 Plus, we have this jelly-like effect, but it's actually even worse on the Samsung Galaxy S8. So we have lots of warping and, again, inertia-based stabilization. But overall, I would pick the Samsung Galaxy S8 when it comes to how stable this shot looked. But now let's do a stabilization in 1080p, which does support cinematic stabilization on the iPhone 8 as well. And just taking a look at the video quality alone, it's so much sharper on the iPhone 8. The S8 looks like 720p upscaled, to be honest. In case you're wondering, both of them actually have the same bitrate at around 18 megabits per second. The iPhone 8 has a lot of flickers, so lots of shakiness, but still much better than the 4K stabilization, but still not as good as the S8 one, which is very smooth in this case. Moving on to an auto-focusing speed test, the iPhone 8 is actually quite fast, so it takes about 1 second or even less to switch from a close subject to a pretty far away subject. Now the S8 is way faster than the iPhone 8. It comes with dual pixel technology, and in terms of autofocus, yes, the S8 wins this one by a mile. Now moving on to slow motion. So in terms of slow motion, the S8 can do 720p at 240 frames per second, and the iPhone 8 Plus can do 1080p at 240 frames per second. So the Samsung Galaxy S8, as you can see, it's actually sharper if you take a look at the left-hand side. Now the iPhone 8 is much sharper if you take a look at the rocks. So it's quite interesting, but honestly, quality-wise, I was expecting more from the iPhone 8. I mean, they both look really bad. So this actually looks like 1080p upscaled from 720p. So 720p upscaled to 1080p, to be honest. But overall, I do feel like the S8 is a bit sharper. That post-processing sharpness definitely helps a lot in this case. Now moving on to low light video. So the iPhone 8, this is a 4K at 30 frames per second shot, by the way. So the 4K 60 is much darker, obviously. So 4K 30 on both. And if you take a look at the first frame only, the iPhone 8 is so much sharper than Samsung Galaxy S8. So if you take a look at the ground, if you take a look at the rails on the left, and also the building in the front. But interesting enough, once you actually start playing the video, the S8 is so much sharper. Also, the S8 has a much more warmer tone to the video, whereas the iPhone 8 Plus has a much cooler tint. So playing the video, you can see that on the right, on the fence, the iPhone 8 does have a lot more noise. So low light video, I would say that the S8 wins in this one as well. Okay, so what about a front facing camera? So this is a photo that I took, same photo on both. You have to take a look at a couple of things here. So first off, take a look at the sky. Take a look at the sharpness and the color of these images. So color-wise, the iPhone 8 is definitely better. We get much more vibrant greens. We also get much more realistic skin tones than on the S8. And then also, if you take a look at my shirt, this one was perfectly black. But the S8 one kind of looks some sort of like a blue. So definitely a cooler tint than a much warmer tint on the iPhone 8. But if you take a look at sharpness alone, the S8 is so much sharper if you take a look at my face and my eyebrows and so on than the iPhone 8. And that's because the Samsung Galaxy S8 actually has autofocus on the front-facing camera, whereas the iPhone 8 doesn't. Okay, so this is a front-facing camera comparison of the S8 Plus versus the iPhone 8 Plus. So if you take a look at the viewing angle, it's almost the same. I think the S8 Plus is a tiny bit wider, but just take a look at the colors behind me. By the way, this is the audio coming from the iPhone 8 Plus, and now this is the audio coming from the S8 Plus. So take a look at the highlights, take a look at the greens. They're much more in focus. And by the way, the S8 Plus also has autofocus on the front-facing camera. So if I just move my head, you can see that it tries to find focus, and it focused on the leaves and the bushes behind me. Now if I'm back in focus, it focuses back on my face. The iPhone 8 Plus doesn't have autofocus on the front-facing camera. But let me know in the comments which one you think looks better, and I definitely think it's the S8 Plus one. By the way, it's Quad HD video on the S8 Plus versus 1080p 30 on the iPhone 8 Plus. Moving on to some low-light shots taken with the front-facing camera. So in this one, you can see that the S8 is significantly brighter than the iPhone 8. So that's because it comes with a much larger aperture. So we have f1.7 versus f2.2 on the front-facing camera. And if you take a look at my hair, it's so much more visible on the S8. So sharpness-wise, the S8 is better, but the iPhone does retain more detail when it comes to my face, when it comes to shadows. So if you take a look at the shadows, if you take a look at a fence behind me, it does look much sharper on the iPhone 8. And now a front-facing camera test in low light taken with a flash. So here, the Samsung Galaxy S8 does have a broader flash, similar to the back-facing one. So it's much brighter, but you can definitely tell that this image was taken with a flash. Whereas on the iPhone 8, it's more of like a more natural light. Now, I still think that the S8 is sharper, and overall, it is a better and much sharper image in low light than the iPhone 8 is. So I do prefer the S8 one, again, on this one than the iPhone 8 one. Let me know in the comments which one do you guys prefer. Okay, so this is a front-facing camera test of the iPhone 8 Plus and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. So the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has an f1.7 aperture versus f2.2 on the iPhone 8 Plus, 7 megapixels versus 8 megapixels on the S8 Plus. So let me know in the comments if you think one of them looks better. I think the S8 Plus does quite a lot more noise reduction from what I can tell from the phones, and the iPhone 8 Plus is a lot more noisier, but yeah, let me know which one you prefer. I think you have a lot more detail, a bit more detail in the iPhone 8 Plus. Maybe that's just me. Next up, let's take a look at some panorama shots and see if we have any differences here. So resolution wise, the iPhone 8 is about 29 megapixels and the Samsung Galaxy S8 is about 26 megapixels. So about the same. Now, the iPhone 8 does have a better image when it comes to dynamic range. And if you take a look at the details and the overall color and the color reproduction, it's much better on the iPhone 8 versus the Samsung Galaxy S8. But the S8 actually has a much better stitching. So for example, if you take a look at the top of the hotel building, the iPhone 8 actually messed that up quite a bit. And then if you take a look at the clouds, you can also see that again, and on the bottom platform as well. Also, another reason why the S8 is better when it comes to panorama shots than the iPhone 8 is because, you know, you can see these ducks. So yeah, the S8, just joking, obviously. Now, moving on to a couple of time lapses. Honestly, both of these are horrible. So they look awful. So both of these are 1080p, which is quite disappointing. I was expecting to see 4K time lapses on the iPhone 8, but they're still 1080p. And interesting enough, I've actually recorded 5 minutes of time lapse on both. So 21 seconds is the total length on the iPhone 8 versus 6 seconds on the Samsung Galaxy S8 on auto mode. Now, the Samsung Galaxy S8 also slowed down the time lapse when a subject stepped in front of the camera, which is pretty interesting. Again, auto mode on the S8. And when it comes to the bitrate, we have a 32 megabits per second bitrate on the iPhone 8 versus 17 on the S8. So almost double the bitrate on the iPhone 8. Now, if you take a look at the image in general, the iPhone 8 does have a brighter image. So the S8 does have a more vibrant image overall. It's more contrasty, but it did crush the blacks quite a lot. So it is sharper. If you take a look at the sharpening on the pavement, at least, it's sharper. But if you take a look at the buildings in the background, they're so much sharper on the iPhone 8 than the Samsung Galaxy S8. So overall, time-lapse wise, the iPhone 8 definitely takes this one. Now, I want to mention a few things when it comes to the 4K video recording bitrate and also the recording space. So the iPhone 8 in 60 frames per second has a bitrate of 106 megabits per second, which is pretty high. Now, the S8 Plus in 4K 30 has 48 megabits per second, and the iPhone 8 Plus in 4K 30 has around 50 megabits per second. So around the same bitrate if you record in 4K 30, and obviously double that if you double the frame rate to 60 frames per second. Now, when it comes to the actual space, 1 minute of 4K video at 30 frames per second takes 170 megabits per second in HEVC encoding on the iPhone 8, and the same video takes about 350 megabits per second on both the S8 and the iPhone 8 if you use H.264 encoding. So the iPhone 8 is twice more efficient in storage, obviously, if you use the HEVC encoding, which not a lot of devices support at the moment, but the iPhone 8 is still more efficient. Okay, so what's the conclusion in all this? Which phone has a better camera? Well, in the end, they both have some really great cameras, and both actually have a few, ups and a few downs. So if you care about videos, for example, go with the iPhone 8. Definitely go with the iPhone 8. You also get, better slow motion. You also get 4K 60. But if you care about low light, then the Samsung Galaxy S8 seems to still be the king. And also, if you care about front-facing camera shots, even in low light, then the S8 is also the winner here. But if you care about low light shots with the flash, the iPhone 8 has a much better flash. And when it comes to everyday shots, the iPhone 8 is going to be better with a higher dynamic range, a much better color reproduction, and it also preserves a lot more of the detail. So let me know in the comments which one of these two, which shots did you actually prefer? Which one do you guys think is better for your needs, so to say? And also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more extremely in-depth videos like this one. Also check out, if you have enjoyed this video, you might enjoy my Ultimate Speed Test series, in which I test out the performance in a pretty similar fashion. I've done one with the iPhone 8 Plus versus the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus yesterday, and the iPhone 8 Plus versus the iPhone 7 Plus, in case you're curious on how that goes. Also, be sure to enable notifications on my channel by simply tapping on that bell icon so that you're notified whenever a new epic video comes out. I have a lot of cool stuff coming soon on the iPhone 8, so definitely stay tuned for that. And also, if you have enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like to let me know. This video was really difficult to make, so every feedback is really appreciated. And yeah, this has been pretty much it. So thank you for watching. I'm Daniel, and yeah, I'll see you guys in my next one. Zen of Tech, signing out. Cheers.